just going to welcome everyone to Jubilee School in general. So Jubilee School is a production of Debt Collective. It's where we try and do political education on a variety of debt types. And that means doing work on medical debt, housing debt, lunch debt, K through 12 debt, and of course, higher education debt, along with student debt. So we try to create situations where we can problematize, criticize indebted life, and we can also offer different types of ways towards liberation and abolition. And we've been doing this now for several years, and it's a pleasure to finally be having the opportunity to team up with Helu to do a production here. A couple things about some ground rules. If you want to make a comment during the presentations and or during our opportunities for question and dialogue, if you could please type the word stack in the chat, that'll help me and Joe keep track of who wants to speak. The other thing I want to do before we get started is if you could kindly enter your name, and if you want to do an affiliation, that would be great. If you also want to list how much debt you have of any type, I'll list my student debt, which is around $230,000. That would be welcome as well. So if you could list your name, affiliation, any of your debt load, please go ahead and do that. If you don't have one type of debt, consider other types of debt that you may be carrying, or consider the ways in which municipal or federal debt impacts your life as well, because it definitely impacts you if you are in a public university. Once you do that, as a way to begin to help us start to think through some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight, ask yourself what it would be like to have that debt canceled, and not just for your own personal life, but for your teaching practice or the ways in which you engage in education in general. And ask yourself what it would take to get to the point where that debt is abolished and or canceled. For what it's worth, at Debt Collective, we never ask for debt forgiveness. We don't ask for debt forgiveness because none of us did anything wrong by going into debt. They owe us, we don't owe them anything. And so we ask for abolition or cancellation, but we never talk about debt forgiveness. There's been no sin. As I said, I'm Jason Wozniak. I'm with the Debt Collective. I'm also a professor in education philosophy at Westchester University. I figured it'd be good to have Joe, who's another facilitator, and Jerry do a 30-second introduction to themselves as well. So, Joe, why don't you introduce yourself, and then Jerry, please introduce yourself as well.
Sure. Thank you, Jason. Hey, everybody. My name is Joe Ramsey. I am at UMass Boston, where I'm a senior lecturer. That makes me a full-time, non-tenure track employee on a 4-4 course load in English and American Studies. I am the chair of the Contingency Task Force and also for Helu, Higher Ed Labor United, and also on the steering committee of Higher Ed Labor United. And it's been a real pleasure organizing this event with you, Jason. I know we've been talking about this for a while, and I think Jerry's going to bring some great stuff today too. So thank you all for being here, and I'll pass it to Jerry.
Geez, Joe, we had one conversation. So my name is Jerry O'Brien Losi. I am AFT Local 2190, United University Professions. We are 40,000 across New York State. I am the statewide secretary treasurer for that, for the local on full-time release. I am a professional contingent. So I am a director of opportunity programs back at my home campus, but on leave to serve as a statewide officer. Also a member of Helu. So hi, the new people I'm learning from Helu. And of course, Mike Green, who is one of our members and invited me or offered me up as tribute. I had 74,335 of my own debt forgiven through public service loan forgiveness. I'll learn not to say forgiven. I like that terminology. For UUP members, we have seen 12.7 million dollars in forgiveness, including, I don't know if Mike's ever told his story, but which continues to grow. And I think one of the things that I bring is not only what knowledge and what understanding about the kind of the for the PSLF side of things is also a offer that I offer virtual clinics almost every one of our paydays when you're thinking about money, that I am happy to invite people to. So is that enough of an introduction?
Yeah, that's wonderful. And thank you, Jerry. So I'm going to do a real brief introduction and then turn it over to Joe and then Jerry. We're also going to have opportunities for some testimonies around debt, and we'll have some moments for breakout rooms. And we'll close with some dialogue and questionings about what can be done and how do we do what we want to do in order to get us closer to debt abolition. So I'll start by saying that Joe and I met a few years ago when he graciously invited myself, Astra Taylor, and Jeffrey Williams, who are both here, on his podcast to discuss student loan debt and higher education. I had the opportunity on this particular show to rehearse some ideas on debt abolition pedagogy that we'll be mentioning today and building on. So I'm very interested in this question of not only the ways that debt educates us, as Jeffrey has done some great scholarship on, and shapes who we are and what we do and why we do it, but also what we can do to create a counter debt pedagogy. In other words, like to create people, subjectivity, ideology, et cetera, that's going to help us build different types of knowledge and skills to resist indebted life. During the show and then afterwards, Joe and I formed a friendship, and through the years, we've discussed the importance of linking debt and labor struggle. So Joe Barry was talking about the university as a workplace early on, and this is going to be a big aspect of our conversation here today. And so in talking about debt and labor struggle in higher education and beyond, Joe and I started to discuss the possibilities of bringing a workshop together that we're here doing right now. So what would it look like to bring together higher education, labor united, to talk about labor issues, combined with debt collective, and start to bind this analysis, to bring it together, this analysis of debt as a labor issue. And I'm particularly excited to have Jerry join us here too, to talk about some of the ways in which we can free ourselves of this debt that not only shapes how we teach and learn, but also how we go about our work and how much work we have to do. And so that's a big point. But I thought that to get us started around thinking around this issue of debt as a labor issue, I wanted to share briefly a document that Debt Collective put together several years ago, and I'm going to upload it here onto the chat, and then I'm going to share my screen. So you should get this in the chat in about 2 seconds. And hopefully everybody got that. I don't know. Gregory Walmart, can you give me a thumbs up if you got that in your chat? Great. Okay, so Asher, you got it too. So I'm also going to share very briefly this document that Debt Collective put together that I think is definitely worth taking a look at insofar as how it starts to bridge and bring together the interconnectedness of labor and debt. And so what we came up with, and this is something that we were doing at a period where it looked like the Biden administration was going to pass more debt cancellation than they did, or at least tried to pass more than they did. And we thought that it was really important that the Biden administration recognize how much debt cancellation would benefit labor in general. And so we came up with this list and some descriptors, which we can go over later in more detail, but I just want to go through really quickly the top 10 reasons why we think that student debt cancellation is a labor issue. And so on the one hand, student debt is wage theft. On the other hand, student debt is a form of indenture. That's a line that Jeffrey Williams has made popular. Student debt is a bill workers must foot for their own job training. How many of us went into debt to get the degrees that we needed to get in order to do what we do, and a lot of us be here? The ways in which student debt stays on the table and impacts contract negotiation and wins is very important to talk about, as is the way that student debt robs many workers of the freedom to pursue important, socially, morally good employment. We had this line about Biden being the most pro-union president. If he was, he would cancel more debt than he did. And we also have another idea here about the ways in which the indebted folks are at a disadvantage when they go to the bargaining table. And this is for a variety of reasons, but one can make an argument that by keeping people in debt, you weaken labor power, because if you're in debt, you have to take different contracts in order to get out of that debt. And so it does weaken the labor position. I know a lot of us here have, and I used to be an adjunct and lecturer myself, and I was in the situation, but I know that a lot of people here are doing second, third, fourth jobs. So student debt drives workers to seek a variety of types of work in order to make it. And that is connected to number 9, along with other things, that debt robs our leisure time. That is a way that our time is stolen from us because we are constantly at work trying to service it and or stay out of it. And then finally, what union member would not want to send their children to a tuition-free quality college? So you get the idea here, although that was quick, about some of the ways that we can consider debt to be a labor issue. I would add, as Joe just put, debt making workers more fearful to fight the boss. There's good empirical evidence now that shows that debt is actually one of the things that limits strikes and limits the ability to people to go on strike and to stay on strike. So this is something else that we need to consider as we gear up for more, call it hot labor summer or whatever we might call it in the fall and spring. But this is something for us to remember. And I'll also add that the more and more that we're facing really harsh forms of repression, we need to remember that the history of the student debt crisis is bound up with ways to try and limit anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist protest in the 1970s and 60s. And so debt was a response to try and discipline student populations and others. With that said, we are going to talk about some of the ways of around pedagogy and debt, and I'm going to turn this over to Joseph Ramsey to introduce us to that topic. And then from there, we'll have some time for some question and answer, and we'll hear from Jerry, and we'll get some testimonials. So Joe, take it away.
Thank you, Jason and all. I'm going to actually read remarks here. Hope it doesn't seem too cold, but hopefully it'll keep me a little more focused and on time. It's great to have you all here tonight. Often public discussions of student debt focus on what happens after graduation, the decades of financial burdens people bear after leaving college, the way debt shackles their life prospects, and the way these chains of debt feed and compound existing inequalities and injustices across our society. This focus is completely necessary and understandable. As triple graduate of Tufts University, BA, MA, PhD, myself now teaching as a full-time NTT faculty, non-tenure track faculty at Boston's only public research university, I still carry over $100,000 in student debt for my undergraduate and graduate educations, despite 10 years paying back these loans in some form already, including garnishment, which, bad loan subject that I am, doesn't count towards my public service loan forgiveness, unless Jerry can blow my mind later with details about that. I'm also father of a beautiful and precocious but very expensive 2-year-old toddler, Lila Joy, living in one of the most costly cities of the United States, the college hub of Boston. I am painfully aware of how student debt can have huge impacts on daily life, and in particular on one's inability to imagine a future beyond paying each month's pressing bills and teaching next semester's slew of classes. But tonight, I will be focusing not so much on this personal post-college student debt experience, but rather on the spectral force that such future debt plays in the educational present of our own college classrooms. I hope tonight to offer some observations and some strategies, pedagogical and political, for conjuring this ever-present specter of future debt, drawing it out of the the background where it haunts and petrifies us and our students, into the foreground where it can be closely and collectively examined alongside and in dialogue with our students, and where the stigma and shame associated with both debt as well as with our own exploitative labor conditions and job precarity as contingent faculty can be objectified and exorcised. Anytime we enter our classrooms, I'd argue, the specter of debt, like worker precarity and educator contingency, is already there, whether we speak of it directly with our students or not. What are some of the ways debt and the specter of debt manifests in our classrooms? They manifest in myriad ways. In students who have chosen, quote unquote, majors they're not passionate about or even honestly interested in, because they perceive, rightly or wrongly, that this other major provides a path to earnings that can allow them to pay back the loan they are now accruing. It manifests in students who are utterly exhausted by 30, 40 hours a week of low-wage labor on top of their studies, work hours meant to help them avoid debt, but which also risks avoiding missing out on an academic education altogether. It manifests in students without time or sleep or energy to read the books or do the work, let alone stick around for deep dive conversations in office hours and for community organizing. It manifests in students overloading their course schedules with online and summer courses galore, 5 or 6 or 7 at a time, to try and trim the time to graduation and shave from their debt burden after graduation. It manifests as anxiety in the present, uncertainty about the future, and as resentment even of us professors in the present, as some students come to measure what they are getting or not getting in each particular class through the narrow financial measure of how will this class help me pay back the financial burden I'm now taking on to be in this class. The question then is not whether or not we encounter and engage the structural reality of debt in the classroom, but how do we engage it? Ignoring it there, of course, pretending it doesn't exist is one option, but one that runs the risk of naturalizing for our students the present bad state of things as if it's just what it is and has always been this way and thus must be. Such an approach risks signaling ignorance or apathy to our students regarding our lack of knowledge of the realities they are dealing with, and that we are too. And it cedes the powerful space of our classrooms at a moment when we cannot afford to do that. Images of ostriches with heads in sand come to mind. So then tonight, I'd like to share just a few snapshots of approaches and pedagogical tactics or strategies I've taken to using in my own classroom at UMass Boston. I will just briefly note, a historically working class, though increasingly middle class, but still super diverse, urban, predominantly public commuter school. I hope not only to share some maybe useful tactics and language here, but also to provoke debate. In particular, I think for the shortness of my remarks, hopefully relatively short, I won't get into so much the obstacles. What is it that holds people back, particularly but not exclusively contingent faculty, from talking more openly with students about some of these things? And I'd like to just signal that as I'm going to kind of put out what I think can be done, what I try to do. I am not presupposing everyone is in a position or feels in a position to do that yet. But nonetheless, I'm going to put it out there and we can talk about what are the obstacles that need to be overcome to make more overt critical debt and labor pedagogy in the classroom, not just in labor studies classrooms, in all of our classrooms, more common and more of a mass phenomenon. So 2 questions I hope we can discuss later, but I'll flag now. What are the opportunities that exist for consciously and critically engaging with our students around issues of debt and labor precarity? And what are the obstacles? Second question, what are the obstacles that stand in the way of making fuller and more overtly committed use of our classrooms and other curricular spaces? There are a few key question clusters that I try to make sure every student who I ever encounter in a classroom or in any sustained co-curricular space has to deal with and hopefully get the answers to, or at least engage themselves. Question 1, or question cluster 1. How much do you think it cost to attend UMass Boston as a full-time student in 1965 when it first opened? And how does that compare with what it costs today? Answer, $100 per semester full-time, $200 a year at UMass Boston in 1965, versus around $15,000 per year today. That's in-state tuition, which is double for out-of-state students and often triple when you add the headhunter fees international students are often paying to come through the campus door. And this is at a relatively inexpensive public institution with a historic urban mission to serve low-income and socially marginalized students. Nonetheless, at UMass Boston, that's an increase of 7 to 8 times the rate of inflation. Question cluster 2. How would your life and your relation to learning and to school be different if the cost of your education was still where it was in 1965? Hi, Lila. Okay, so she's here to steal the show. Stop my time. This is Lila's time. So I don't even want to project those debt numbers into the future, assuming Lila's goes to college in the future. But that's I guess that's her prop for me to make that point. So I asked the students next, how would your life be different if the cost of education now were where it were in 1965? Okay, we can adjust it. I like to make it $100, but let's adjust it to inflation to make it $1,000 or $2,000 a year, right? What would you be studying and focusing on in and out of school, or able to do more of or less of, if freed of this heavy tuition burden? That's Lila. Yeah, that's Lila. Hey, Mama, can you help? Yeah, I'm doing talk. You need to come to me. Bye, Lila. Okay, that's Lila. Lila always makes a contribution. Okay. Okay, so if you were freed of this debt burden or this potential debt burden, this tuition burden, how would your life be different, not just in the future, but now. The responses to question 2 can vary widely, but there are some recurring and uniting themes. Students would be able to work for wages less, sleep more, be physically and mentally healthier, live closer to campus and thus reduce commuting time, a big deal in Boston, spend more time with friends and family and on other leisure activities and passions outside of school. Students would feel less stressed, less anxious, less depressed, and less pressured from family to optimize every moment of their costly education. Students would be able to pursue fields they love and are interested in and take more courses they are curious about without an immediate worry about financial return. Art, music, philosophy, environmental activism, research, teaching, working with children. Students say they would be more able to devote themselves to pursuing work that they feel the world actually needs, rather than just what they need now to survive. This then, of course, leads to a great opportunity to discuss and explore a range of questions, from the historical to the political. Question cluster 3, what or who caused this massive change in tuition and debt loads? Why did this radical rise in tuition and thus work hours and debt even occur? This question leads us to look at the shift in governmental policies and budget trends that have contributed to this explosion in tuition and thus in debt loads, as well as to interrogate the Powell memo and other ruling class conspiracies to make education less accessible that Jason alluded to a moment ago in the wake of the Vietnam War and the anti-imperialist and anti-racist uprisings of the 60s. Basically, here in Massachusetts, on the budgetary front, as in many states across the United States, we've gone through a situation where roughly 80% of the cost of a public college education was borne by the state via some measure of tax revenue, to one where less than 20% now is being publicly covered, the rest falling on individual students and their families. So we've gone from roughly an 80-20 split to a 20-80 split at best. Call it the rise of neoliberalism, of public austerity, alongside skyrocketing private wealth increasingly protected from public taxation. We've moved from a progressive, relatively progressive tax state to a punitive debt state. Alongside this, compounding the problem is the phenomenon of privatization, as even in public higher ed, institutional leaders are compelled by underfunding to chase tuition dollars by any means necessary, driving administrators, even the enlightened ones, to compete and recruit full tuition-paying students from across the country and the world, rather than directly serving the working class, less lucrative local students where they are. This then, in part, accounts for the upper admin bloat, as these underfunded systems are driven to recruit corporate experts and build up whole divisions in marketing, recruitment, fundraising, and the development of appealing student experience. It also accounts for the absurd amenities race at many colleges and the billions poured into non-educational projects on our campuses, treating students and their families more and more as customers, and education, or rather the degree and the college brand, more and more as a commodity, or at best, a private personal investment in individual human capital. Students, though, as neoliberal subjects, seldom taught to see the public policy dimensions of their own lives or educational paths, may first come up with a different hypothesis in response to this question of where the money's going and why college costs so much. One that many hostile forces in the society are eager and constantly preaching at them to falsely explain the student crunch they feel they are in. That is the answer. Where does all the tuition money go? Why has college gotten so expensive? It must be all those overprivileged, spoiled, and overpaid, and in sometimes radical professors. This then provides an opportunity, and I would argue a need, to pivot from student cost debt to the myth versus reality of labor conditions on our campuses. Ironically, as many here tonight surely know, during the very same period that tuition and debt have skyrocketed, contrary to persisting caricatures of the ivory tower, we've seen a trend to the place we are now in, where fully 3/4, really it's over 80% when we include graduate student employees, of all teaching in U.S. higher ed is done by people locked out of the tenure track, a full half of these confined to the truly precarious and often outrageously exploited and abused ranks of the part-time lecturers or so-called adjunct faculty. A seeming paradox emerges. How could the cost of college be going up so dramatically while at the same time the compensation and security of most faculty has been going dramatically down? Where is all that money flowing? To get to this point in class, I like to engage students in a bit of radical mathematics through another question sequence. Question: how much are each of you paying or being made to pay by this system for this college course or any single college course right now at this university? How much are you paying collectively, all of you, all the students in the class, for this one class right now? We do the math on the board. It's fun. We get to realize how much arithmetic we've forgotten and try to remember it together. And then we get to the follow-up question. How much of that total amount of money is actually going to the person teaching the class? And here I am not shy. I share the facts of the matter without shame or apology. Here, even in an English class, we transmute into a subversive math class for a moment, covering the chalkboard with some simple arithmetic as we pursue a ballpark answer to the question, what is the rate of exploitation in this class? That is, what is the gap between the money value people are paying for this educational service and what the worker providing that service is actually getting paid for providing it? Now, here I want to make an important qualification. Let's be clear, and let's not fall into faculty centrism. There are many other costs and people necessary for making what appears as a college course happen, from keeping the lights and the heat and the AC on, to the staff who maintain and clean the facilities, to the graduate assistants, the professional staff that keep offices and programs running, to the student services and public health supports, and on and on. Ideally, this critical math problem needs to be done collectively, not just at the level of one individual class. Nonetheless, the exercise, however crude and approximate, can be quite revealing and quite provocative. Thus, in my own backyard, a public university class with, say, 30 students, where each student is paying $2,000 per class, generates around $60,000 in tuition revenue for just that one class. And yet, the often NTT instructor of that class may be paid only around $6,000 at that course, thanks to our union. Perhaps as a community college adjunct, they get half that. This means in this hypothetical but ballpark example of all the student money being paid for that small to mid-sized course, only 10% or maybe just 5% of tuition revenue is actually going to the professor doing the teaching. And this, mind you, is for a relatively small to mid-sized class at a public institution where tuition is still many times cheaper than at many private institutions, which similarly rely on contingent and underpaid labor. It's likely that many classes and many classrooms where this exercise would be done would find that exploitation rates go well over 90%, with 95 or even $99 of every 100 paid by students for that class not going to the person teaching it. Often after students' jaws hit the floor and bounce back, I've had students eager to try out similar social math problems based in their own work situations, often at low-wage jobs in the service sector or restaurant industry. Students working near full-time as students and fast food workers passionately tally the average meal orders during a shift and the average meal cost and divide by the number of workers they work alongside during a shift and share the results, not just with me in the class, I hope, but with their coworkers too. Comparative exploitation studies, anyone? To briefly wrap up, such exercises make the existence of surplus extraction clear both on campus and beyond it, even as they raise forcefully the question of who has crafted this exploitative system and what needs to be done to take that surplus back and to restructure society so it's not even based on such predation in the first place. Crucially, such sequencing of questioning and dialogue repositions students and professors, at least if I'm doing it right, among other campus workers, not as structural antagonists, the teacher ruling over the students, but as structural allies and potential comrades, mutually faced with exploitative predatory academic labor and debt systems that extract from both of us, educators and students alike, a system that is chewing up and spitting out the hope for quality higher education for all from both ends at once. And of course, many of us contingent faculty have debt too. We are the students' future in that respect and have an opportunity to bring that future into the present and short circuit its normal dynamic. I'd just like to conclude by reflecting on the collective movement possibility this kind of pedagogical shift might help seed, and we can talk about the barriers and obstacles and the strategies we need to make it more possible for more people to do this if they want to, maybe in discussion. But we literally have millions of students flowing through our classrooms every year. What if even 10% of all faculty made it a point to integrate this sort of debt and labor critical pedagogy into our courses in some way, assuring that every college student at some point in their college careers, if not every semester or every year, would have a chance to engage in this kind of questioning alongside others materially involved in this very crisis. Imagine the potential consciousness raising and the repoliticization of huge sectors of the population. Imagine the potential for student faculty trust building and solidarity. Of course, I can hear some people thinking, sounds good, Joe, but easier said than done. And I agree. There are real material reasons as well as ideological, cultural reasons that people hold back from doing this kind of thing. And maybe the most obvious one for those of us active in HELU and in the contingency task force and Higher Ed Labor United, the contingent and job vulnerability of most teachers today make it difficult for people to take these risks. People often have very good reason to fear for their jobs and to want to stick to the syllabus, teach to the test, enacting a narrow understanding of their educational mission and its relation to students' own lives. So I'm not up here to preach and say to guilt trip people that aren't doing this, but I do want to say I see it as a collective responsibility that we do teach students how the sausage is made collectively before they're out of our institutions, that we are not allowing the mystified veils of the bullshit discourse all around our society about what's wrong with higher ed to not get countered while they are actually going through these institutions. And I'm very well aware that we need collective strategies to have the back of people that would like to or might consider doing this kind of thing, but aren't structurally positioned to feel comfortable doing it, knowing that the vulnerability and precarity of people is a very unevenly distributed thing. Class, race, gender, nationality, status, institutional type, the kind of chair you have all matters here. And we can't elude those. We can't elude those things. We need to confront them. But I still think we need to be I would like to challenge us today to think about how can we use the power and confront the powerlessness of our classrooms as politically transformative space around issues that affect both students and us directly in the here and now, as well as in the future. And thank you for your time. I went a few minutes over, but I really look forward to the discussion. And thank you for being here.
Thank you, Joe. Good stuff. What we're going to do now is take a few moments to allow some of you to give some testimony about what it's like to live the indebted life, to teach with debt. And as Astra and Thomas and Shamel and some other debt collective comrades will tell you, one of the hardest things about organizing debtors is that debtors are spread out, and it's hard to get debtors together in one place at one time, for some of the reasons that we already mentioned and that Joe brought up as well. Debtors are working, debtors are overburdened with tasks, and there is a stigma and guilt associated with it. So one of the things I like to say is that the neoliberals might have made a really big mistake insofar as they put a bunch of debtors in the same place. And that place is, as Joe alluded to, the university. So how do we take advantage of that? One of the ways we take advantage of that is by opening up space, not only to do what Joe was doing, but another pedagogy that we practice at Debt Collective and have been practicing since Occupy Wall Street is debtor assembly. And this is a type of practice where we share debt testimony. And by sharing debt testimony, we not only come out of the debtor's closet, as we like to say, and shed the stigma and guilt associated with debt, but we also use story to sharpen our analysis, to dig into structural problems about what has caused some of the individual suffering. So along with those lines, what I'd like to do is to ask for, let's say, 2 or 3 volunteers that are willing to share their debt stories. I think given what Joe has mentioned and a little bit what I brought up earlier, it would be, I think, very profound to hear not only about how debt impacts your life, but also about how debt is a labor issue for you and how debt impacts your teaching or your pedagogy. How does debt show up in your classrooms? I will ask that because it's sometimes we don't get often many chances to talk about debt. And so sometimes when we get a chance, we start to talk for a very long time. But for the sake of space and allowing other people the opportunity to say some things, I'd ask that you try and keep your talk or your testimony to around 3 minutes or so at the max. So I see Justine, you're on stack. And as Justine speaking, if anyone else would like to offer a testimony, please go ahead and just type the word stack in the chat and we'd love to hear from you. So Justine, why don't you kick us off, please?
Sure. Hey, everybody. My name's Justine. I teach sociology at a community college in Arizona called Estrella Mountain Community College. And it's funny because I'm like, Joe, have you been in my classroom? Because it sounds very much like what I do. But I've also had the opportunity to invite debt collective members out to my classroom to talk about debt as well. And it's been really fantastic. One of the things that Joe mentioned that really stood out to me and I can reflect back on in my own class is the way in which asking students, how would not having debt or not worrying about debt change your lives, right? Because what we really see in that moment then is the way in which other ways of being in the world, other ways of moving through the world really start to unfold from people's lived experiences, right? And so I always think about this memory that I have in my classroom, my Social 101 class. I always start talking about student debt, actually. That's how we start introducing like conflict theory and all these kind of different things. And letting students know that like, yeah, y'all had some movements, social movements that were really effective. And then they came for us, right? And so let's talk about how this actually works. And so I always start the question with the class with, if you weren't worried about money in any way, you weren't worried about debt, you weren't worried about being able to make money when you are finished with college, so on and so forth, or as you are currently going through college, right? What would you study? And students take a minute to think about it, talk amongst themselves a little bit about it, right? And the one that always stands out to me is my student who told me that he just wants to be a marine biologist. And again, we're in Arizona and there's no ocean near us, right? And so to be a marine biologist in Arizona means that you have like a really strong, love for the ocean and wanting to be a part of that space, right? And he says this and he just lights up thinking about marine biology, and it's really beautiful, right? And then he says, but my parents are worried about the debt that I'll have. And so I'm majoring in business, and like the sadness, right? Like the way in which debt forecloses possible futures, right, is heartbreaking. And in that moment, we start to build solidarity and start to create space where we can see the commonalities between ourselves as professors and our students, right? Because so much of this pedagogy is about like, hey, like, yeah, I'm the professor and I'm up here and I have degrees or whatever, right? But like, you have just as much knowledge as I do, if not more so in some cases, right? And so let's use this knowledge to start thinking through how the world could be otherwise. And by the end of the class, the students are starting to think about, like maybe debt doesn't need to exist, right? We talk about how college used to be free or close to free in California and all these different things, right? And it enables them to imagine the world otherwise. And I think that is probably the number one most important thing when we're thinking about, or one of the most important things, at least when we're thinking about organizing across debt and labor, right, is our ability to think that other things are possible. And so I just really appreciate this space because it allows us to continue to broaden our political imagination. So thank you. Thank you for letting me share as well. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Justine. That's super inspiring. And something that you said really struck me when you were talking about debt as something that forecloses future, but sounds like what you're able to do through your practice is build solidarity to open that future back up. And that's very inspiring. So thank you for sharing that. It's really helpful. Maria, I think I saw you on Stack. Would you like to share a testimony, please? Good to see you here.
Yes, good to be here. And yeah, I'd love to chime in. So, and I'll keep this brief and focused as much as possible. So I know that in my own life, for example, I'm glad that a lot of people have been able to get rid of their debt, not have it forgiven, but get rid of their student debt. But unfortunately, that scheme does not cover those of us who have private loans. And years ago, long story, I refinanced my federal loans into private, and now I'm not eligible for any of these PSLF or SAVE or anything like that. So that's one very frustrating reality. Another is that even as I try to quote unquote retool and learn new skills, get out of academia, or at least have other sources of income, I realize that they all require money. And of course, the more debt you have, the less you earn, the harder it is for you to accumulate that capital. And in my case, that's meant trying for a couple of other degrees, both of which fell, well, one of them is on hold essentially, and the other one I don't know what's going to happen with, in part because the school where I was pursuing it doesn't exist anymore. So those are very real situations affecting a lot of people. There are also minimum enrollments to qualify for federal loans in the first place. So that really limits us in a lot of ways. And Joe spoke earlier about students who are overburdened in various ways. One of them is just taking too many classes just to qualify for financial aid, because otherwise they would have to pay out of pocket, or whatever loans they would be able to get, excuse me, would have a much higher interest rate and onerous terms. So, and again, I'm giving that as an example of, I'm sure, many, many similar stories that are playing out as we speak. And then on the student end, again, the idea of students as consumers, some of them will be quite vocal about it, which does not work with me, but they'll say things like, oh, you work for me, or my tuition is paying your salary, right? As Joe and his students have calculated, if only, right? Yeah, but that kind of attitude, I mean, it's extremely disrespectful and otherwise unacceptable, but it also hurts them, because if they think of their education as only a commodity, something that they're buying, or their parents or whoever, then they're not enjoying it. They're not learning as much as they could be. They're just buying a credential, presumably, and or a service, or both. So those are, and I try to bring that into my teaching in various ways. For example, I've started telling students quite explicitly, I do the best I can to teach you. Various counselors, librarians, and so forth also do their best to serve students, but we're also overworked. There are too few of us to do the work that needs to be done. So please understand that. And if you, wish to complain, go to the chancellor, go to the president of the college, and, good luck. I'll be happy to help you. And that doesn't go over well with some senior faculty, but I'm past the point of caring. So end of rant.
Thank you, Maria. And one thing that you made me think and feel about when you're talking about some of your own difficulties is the level of vulnerability that it takes to talk about debt in our country because of the ways that debt's been stigmatized. And as we're doing that in our classrooms and amongst other groups, I think that's always important to remember, like, how do we create these spaces that are safe enough or feel safe enough for people to share some raw emotions around the question of debt and how it has caused a lot of suffering for a lot of different people in over a long period of time. And so I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing that story. And I think there's another lesson there about what it takes in order to create the space to allow that to happen over time. I think that given that we are running a little bit behind, I think we're going to move now to the second part of the session, which is to focus more on this question of, like, well, what is to be done? Classic question. And to get us started with that, we are going to have a presentation from Jerry O'Brien Losey, who will talk about PSLF and how it has served some of the folks that she's been working with, as well as some ways to problematize it. And then we will allow for some breakout rooms where we'll be able to share amongst smaller groups some thoughts and ideas, both about the problem, but also about what do we do about the problem. And then we'll end with the share out at the end of the night, where we can discuss some possibilities for moving forward and what we might do collectively, both as labor organizers and debt organizers alike. So Jerry, floor is yours. Thanks for being here.
Oh, yeah, thanks so much. And I have to say how welcoming an environment that allows both babies and pets to be a part of this presentation. I appreciate the puppy in the background. Joe and I had a really long conversation when we were talking about where I wanted to start. And again, because I know we had a few people pop on a little later. So I went through public service loan forgiveness after like October 1, 2007, when it started, paper in hand, trying to figure out the process. And it took me until a couple of years ago to have $74,335 forgiven for me. My payments were $1,026 a month because I could not figure out how to pay on time so I could stay in an income-driven repayment plan. And I got pushed into forbearance steering and, all of these horrific stories. So one of the actions I did is I took advantage of some training. And I'm actually a trained person who does student debt clinics. I've done since the pandemic. I've done clinics every one of our paydays because that's when kind of the money hits the road. I do them virtually because I think it's really important we bring the shame into the conversations that we have. You sign up for a clinic, we have to check your membership because I do this as a union thing. But we check the membership. Hi, Bruce. We check the membership and we invite people to become members. It's an organizing opportunity. I can talk more about that, or if anybody's going to AAUP this weekend, I'll be there talking about it. But it's about the shame. So once you sign up, cameras are off. I don't care what you name yourself. I don't care about any of that because the most important part to me is to get the actual information out that will make a difference at your kitchen table. I come from a long line of union families, and my dad always used the term, well, this benefit affects our kitchen table. So all of those kitchen table things that can help in absolutely any way possible to get you some forgiveness. The most forgiveness I've seen is $325,000 for a person who was a part-time academic. The least amount I've seen forgiven is $450, and that was from me, and that was spite. That was what I call my spite forgiveness, and it's a great story over drinks. But the bottom line for me is, yes, things need to be canceled. Things need to be forgiven. But at the end of the day, I need to reach out whoever needs to help. I need to find them and help them. And to me, that is a lot of where the bringing people together comes into play. I can send out an email of the almost 10,000 people who have gone through my clinics, and I can say, I need you to sign on to this PSLF thing. I need you to sign on to this. We have an action coming up. We have a petition to sign. And I have a database of people who came together because they needed help, whether or not they had their cameras on, but they understand. Because it's less pressure when you talk about them, but you talk about it as a movement, as the lawsuits have come online, as the pressure has come online for the forgiveness process. Some of the battles we fight right now, and I have some UUP people on here that can attest to it. Part-time academics don't always know that they qualify to be in public service loan forgiveness, for example. That's where my public service loan forgiveness is my expertise. I could talk about income-driven repayment actually as well. But people still don't realize we're going through a thing right now at one of our chapters in Fredonia, actually, where the HR department is doing what they think they should be doing. But then we found out if people teach like the 9 credits in the 2 semesters to get them to what New York's full-time average is the national one. If you're getting to that 9 credit hours every semester, but HR is only signing off on 8 payments, not all 12 payments that you've made over the year. So there's a huge disconnect. And luckily, I have been able to present to like the HR departments at SUNY and CUNY to try to alleviate that misinformation. And that's not even malice misinformation. It's just that basic, well, you're not working 12 months, but I'm working 8 months out of the year, at least 30 hours a week. I qualify for 12 months worth of payments. God forbid you don't have to give me anything extra to call me full-time, but for the purpose of public service loan forgiveness, at least 30 hours a week, at least 8 months out of the year gets you there. And so, thinking about that contingent nature of most of our members, we are wall to wall. So we're part-time, full-time academic professional, 3 teaching hospitals. I got a little bit of everybody. And then the fear, because of course, programs started October 1 of 2007. October 1 of 2007, public service loan forgiveness, and it's been screwed up since October 1 of 2007. So the adjustments that have been made, and I'm gonna say fixes because I'm gonna try not to swear, but all of those have created different pockets of opportunity for forgiveness. But how do you get that information out? What's that communication piece? What do we have for us? So for us, we have a weekly newsletter, goes out electronically, that if people are subscribed to the newsletter, they have the opportunity, hi Tracy, to be able to get the new information. But I've got people like me that were back in the day of October 1, 2007, that are so damaged from just constantly filling out paperwork, trying to get in the right place, the right repayment plan with the right servicer, that they won't believe and have missed out on some of the forgiveness cycles that have happened, even if they're not currently, there. I'm going to just stop for 1 second. I did put my email address in my name because I have something shiny syndrome, what I call something shiny syndrome. And if I open the chat box, I'll be like gone. So I'll be in the chat box. So I will open the chat box. If you have questions for me, go ahead and put them in there. But I put I'll put it in the link afterwards. And people just cut me out because I can talk about this as those of you who do know me know, I will talk about public service loan forgiveness all day, every day. I'm looking at my friend Mike from University of Florida. My UUP Mike, but my University of Florida Mike, because Florida sucks at getting the information out. So I've actually done, my dad's been through cancer treatment in Florida, and I've actually delivered clinics to the hospitals he's worked with, because it's any level of government or a 501c3 nonprofit, which many hospitals are, many universities are, many private universities that don't know that they're nonprofit. There are so many of those pockets of people who just don't understand. And I will tell you that when I found out I had my final forgiveness after all of this time, it was like the first October 1, it was like what, October 6th of 2021, when the first waiver came out. I happened to have been serving as a chief negotiator for rulemaking for student affordability at that time. So I was there when the Department of Ed, I was actually on the meeting where Department of Ed announced it. I'm on the line because it's pandemic, and I'm online filling out the damn form. And a couple of weeks later, I found out I was one of the first 1,500 people through that got that forgiveness. So I'm at a restaurant with one of my coworkers who's in the next office having a couple bourbons when I get a phone call from like Randy Weingarten, because she's the one I had gone through the training with that trained me to do the debt clinics. But we had been doing debt clinics at UUP. We've been doing debt clinics since 2017, trying to get this information out. And like I said, 12.7 million in forgiveness, going through, and I'm reluctant to say too much about process because we're being recorded. And one of the issues is it's constantly changing. The SAVE program, what do they call it? Why can't I think of the word? I had a clinic today, but the stoppage, the judge court stopping the good things about SAVE just happened. It could change tomorrow. Something could be like a massive forgiveness tomorrow. So where does it, so the only way almost to deliver the information is to try to convince people I am not a big scary person and that there may be things out there that can help. So one of the other things, if I have enough time, one of the other things that I want to talk about is when I give a presentation, I will also beat to death any other benefit to our members that can help with their finances. So we have the, Cambridge counseling group that helps with other types of debt, not just loan forgiveness, but, housing debt, medical debt, first time home buyer crap, all of those things that if we can chip away at some of the issues that people are having at their kitchen tables, we can alleviate that. And because I'll tell you, I had my $1,026 forgiven during the pandemic. I started putting all my payments in the bank. I still couldn't relax. I still couldn't believe that I have the biggest savings account I have ever had in my life. And I'm still afraid that they will come and take it. I am still afraid that they will take it and want it back. So I keep putting money in my savings account, which is great, but I haven't relaxed enough to do anything with it.
So Jerry,
Yes,
I know you said you could go on forever.
I can. And so you have to cut me
And
off.
I think that we need to get your name and contact information in the chat you mentioned you need a pause to do that. So if you could do that. And what we'd like to do before we go into breakout rooms is take a moment to allow for a couple of questions and or comments. That would be very helpful. So Jerry, while you're doing that, if you'd like to have, if other people would like to ask a question or make a comment, and I'll read this off because Jerry, it sounds like you're
that would be
typing
better
stuff.
for me if you wouldn't
Okay.
mind.
No, sure. So Holly and then Joe Barry. So Holly has a question here where sorry, I don't know your pronouns, Holly, but Holly asks, Jerry, can you briefly summarize the issue? Why so few people
Wait,
were
can
approved?
I say what it is instead of
Yeah, even better. Go for it. Sure.
Yeah, thanks. Jerry, thanks so much. I wonder if you might take a moment. There might be some here that don't really know what PSLF is, so it might be useful to summarize that. But the other thing is that since there were many years when people applied and very few people actually got, some portion like 5 or 10%, or maybe less than 10% were approved. Yeah, okay. It might be useful to, just briefly say, why was that the case and what some of the fixes have been that finally opened up PSLF for so many people.
Sure. So a public service loan forgiveness allows you to have the balance of your student loans forgiven after 120 payments tax-free. Now you need to be in the right repayment plan, you need to be with the right servicer, all of those kind of things. But the purpose of it is not a handout, and you will see my head pop off when people say it's a handout or you should pay back your loans or whatever. This was started by George W. Bush. October 1, 2007. It was an incentive to get people into the public service. So when we talk like what Joe was saying about, getting people into the majors they want to be in to be helpful and to do all this, combating that with, oh, you're going to take on all this debt or whatever. It was supposed to help mitigate those kind of things. It was to pull people into the public service. So any level of government, state, federal, municipal, tribal, and 501c3 nonprofits. So think hospital, public schools, anything that's your United Way kind of stuff. Think of all of that could qualify for public service loan forgiveness. Now, October 6th was important for me because that is when they announced a particular waiver that would allow past payments you made in absolutely any program to be whether you were in the right place at the right time and the right whatever, as long as they were federal loans, to be able to have a look back to be able to count past payments and things like that. That ended in like October of 22. In April of 20, I keep my stuff up here. That's where I'm looking. In April of 22, there was an announcement about forbearance steering. Now, forbearance steering is when you called up somebody and you said, I am a new professional. I make crap for money. I can't afford my payment. What can you do? And they would stick you in forbearance or deferment instead of saying, hey, you could make a $25 payment and still have it count toward a forgiveness. And that's called forbearance steering. So you can get credit. You can still get credit for past forbearance steering if you have a loan before 2013. And then we had other types of waivers that have come down the pike. I don't want to beat to death things we can't be a part of right now. I don't want to beat that to death because it gets me so angry. But as those changes come up and as those doors open, getting that information out is important. June 30th was one of the last deadlines. But of course, people who made the last deadline for lookbacks and waivers and stuff like that, their paperwork isn't even processed through yet because the servicers suck. And so we're moving from Mohila to God knows where in the Department of Ed. So one of the things that have that personal, I've been through it. I know I have PTSD from this crap from October 1 of 2007. Okay, I've been paying student loans back since, in the late 80s, early 90s, when I was first in college. First gen would have cut off a leg to be able to go to college, poster child for first gen student. But there were so many of those waivers that get missed. And then you add on top of that, like contingent academics don't even know they could qualify, and they could have all along. And so it's those kind of frustrations that add up. I think I beat that answer to death, Holly. I'm sorry.
So would anyone else like to make one more comment or question? I guess one thing I want to say, I just want to put it out there that Debt Collective's claim and the horizon that we've been striving for is total cancellation for everyone. And I think that one of the things that, off the top of my head, I would say that why should any public service worker have to work 10 years to have their debt canceled at all?
Right.
It seems like that's a form of, to use the word that was used earlier, indenture.
Yeah.
And so I think it is really interesting to think about how do we use the tools available to us, and that have been won through struggle. Because I want to point out again too that some of the ways that public service learn forgiveness, as they call it, has been changed is due to the fact of groups pushing for
Lawsuits,
better programs and better ways of canceling debt. And so I think it's important for us to ask the question about how can unions be more engaged in debt abolition while taking advantage of some of the things that you're talking about here, Jerry. So Michael, could you please ask a question? And then I think we can break it into some breakout rooms, Joe.
Yeah, I'll keep it really brief. Jason, I used to go to Few with you a long time ago. I don't know if you recognize me or not, but one of the,
yeah, good to see you.
Yeah, likewise. I work for an SIU local now that represents faculty and staff at the Connecticut community colleges. And there's institutional debt on top of all the things we've been talking about as well. So capitalism has crept into every nook and cranny of public institutions. And as public sector workers, I wonder how much, one thing that we are trying to do as a really deliberate thing is center political education and organizing as part of our overall organizing and organization building so that we can gain governing power. Because without that, we are never going to win. And so that's a huge fight. I mean, that's a huge project, but it's essential, I think. And so I wonder I'm curious how are you handling this at your locals? How are you talking about this with your with your students, with your colleagues, with your faculty, and with your union staff? Because public sector, it's astonishing to me how few of our workers actually think about politics and governing power, when really that's what we're talking about here. So I'm curious, how many of you do that, and how do you do that, and what's working, what's not working, that kind of thing, because that's kind of what we're wrestling with now.
I'm very partial to that question, Michael, and just I guess add that like how does debt govern, I think is what you're saying too, and how does that shape what we do or don't do?
Absolutely. I mean, our board, our governing body is venture capitalists, hedge fund managers, corporate hacks. They have, our governor is a billionaire. They have Democrats, all of them, but they have no interest in equity or in educated citizenry. They have every interest in maintaining their wealth in Connecticut, while keeping the workers down. And so, yeah, that, to be sure, Jason, you nailed it.
Thank you, Michael. I really appreciate that question. And let's take these two comments from Bruce and Joe, and then let's go into breakout rooms, Joe Ramsey. So we got Bruce and then Joe Barry.
Okay, I'm at SUNY Fredonia, by the way, out in Western New York, and we're facing program cuts and possible retrenchments in the coming months because of the fact that even though New York State covers institutional debt as part of the state budget, what that means is that indirect support gets counted along with the direct operating support, to the point where, you know, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but a large portion of the billions that go to SUNY is this indirect kind of support, whether it's to debt or to benefits or whatever. But it means that's the pressure there. When the direct budgets get squeezed, that's the pressure toward contingency. That's the pressure towards program cuts. That's the pressure towards reducing the workforce in response to this starvation diet on the direct operating budget. So UUP's been doing activism about that for decades, but it's an often little understood twist where legislators or governors will say, well, look, we're giving you all this indirect support, but it cuts into the direct support.
That is a point that I hope we come back to in the larger conversation, Bruce. The many layers that you just kind of unpacked for us in a few sentences, and thank you so much for doing that so clearly. Joe Barry.
Yeah, I just want to build a little bit on what the last two folks have said. As a historian, I think it's important that we communicate to everybody we're talking to, our colleagues, our students, our fellow workers, that financing so much of the public sector via debt is a relatively new thing. I mean, it's in living memory that not just revenue, not just operating expenses, but even capital stuff got done through revenue, not loans, which are subsidies to the same financiers, banks and other financial institutions that have ruined the economy 3 times for most people in our lifetimes with these crashes. And it didn't have to be that way. And the main thing that stands in the way of getting rid of financing everything by debt, whether it's individual debt or institutional and public debt, is that rich people don't want to pay taxes. And they've gotten away with not paying taxes more and more and more ever since the 50s. And that's, I think, a strategic objective that the union movement needs to take on at a much higher level than it has. I'm very proud of my California Federation of Teachers that ran the first successful millionaires tax in the country. The millionaire meaning people who make $1 million a year, not people who are worth $1 million. And as we've fought off attempts to end it, to sunset it, and that's helped the public sector and the educational institutions, but it's not nearly enough. Most states have restrictions in their state constitutions that keep localities from being able to institute progressive taxation, income taxes or wealth taxes, and we need to get rid of those. A few states don't. A few localities, can institute progressive income taxes, but that whole body of stuff needs to get strategized. And luckily, we've got some new union leaders that are willing to talk about this stuff. I know Sean Fain has, and some of the public sector union leaders, the postal workers, and some others have been willing to at least think about this stuff as an important strategic objective for unions at all levels and the labor movement as a whole. And thank you for letting me give my history wrap.
And thank you, Joe, for bringing that up. I can't stress the importance of that enough. And I put it in the chat, but Wolfgang Streeck has called this, one of the things you were talking about, a shift from a tax state to a debt state. And what they mean is exactly what you said, whereby we used to be able to fund public services through taxes on wealthy corporations and individuals. As taxes decrease, public institutions become more reliant on debt in order to do the basic things that we do. And so that historical...
Those expenditures go, half of that money that's expended goes to profit for financial institutions.
That's right.
I mean, just like when you buy a house, people think they bought a house from $500,000. No, you paid $1 million when you add in all the interest over the years.
That's right.
Don't look at that.
Yeah, that's right. Interest and service fees is money that is extracted that could be used to pay faculty, help students, and do other things. So thanks for bringing that up. Joe Ramsey, it's up to you.
All right, great. Really good comments and discussion. Thanks, everybody. We're going to go on to breakout rooms now. I hope y'all can stick around. I know we've been going strong here, but we're going to, sometimes these conversations really get even a new level of richness when we have smaller groups and we can share more personal experiences and observations from where we're living and working and struggling. Jason and I have come up with 3 guiding prompts, non-binding, but nonetheless thought some of you might appreciate it. 3 prompts we're going to encourage you to take into breakout rooms, which I'll read in just a moment. The breakout rooms, we're going to have 5 of them. We have facilitators that have volunteered to lead them. I want to point out that Jerry, since Jerry clearly has much more to say about the nuts and bolts and of this union efforts to support people with public service loan forgiveness and debt management and all this stuff. Jerry's going to take group number 1. So that's the only one that's going to maybe have a kind of you might say a thematic tilt to it. The rest of them are just breakout rooms with facilitators. I'll be in one of them, Jason will be in another, but it's not thematically oriented around anything that we said in particular. We have 3 prompts for everyone. I'm going to read them here, and they're also in the Google Doc. I just posted in the chat box. I'll post it again in a moment. But the 3 prompts we wanted to offer, people can feel free to take them in whatever order and to expand upon them. But the 3 go like this. What could our unions do to support debt abolition? What are they doing already? What could they be doing more? You can think about that in terms of contracts. You can think of that in terms of organizing, political advocacy. Secondly, how does debt impact your teaching practice in the classroom? I guess kind of building on some of what I was touching on earlier. I guess if people want to talk about contingency too in that context, how labor contingency, we could maybe squeeze that one in there. And thirdly, what are strategies or obstacles to building student, faculty, and staff alliance and debtor power on campus? So what are the strategies and what are obstacles that people see to building that student, faculty, staff alliance around debt, as well as linked labor issues, right? So unions, classroom, and student, faculty, staff alliance. So the 3 broad, obviously very large questions. We're going to try to give you 20 to 30 minutes in these breakout rooms. I have created them, and they're going to pop out. They should pop up right now for you. You can just join whatever one you want randomly. I didn't assign you because I wanted to be able to have make sure I knew what room Jerry was going to be in. So please just pick a room. If you're not seeing them pop up, I would recommend looking at that little icon in the bottom. Usually it's, for me, the bottom right-hand corner of your Zoom window where it says more with 3 dots. Click on that. You should see breakout rooms, and hopefully something popped up there if it didn't pop up on your screen. So So you should be able to pick your own room. I'm going to be in room 4 for what it's worth, but I'm not going to go there yet because I want to make sure folks are managing technically. Oh, I just want to say if somebody could in each room could take an initiative for adding to the Google Doc, that would be great. Facilitators, you could play that role as well. We'll see you in about 25 minutes or so. Okay. Seeing no major questions, I'm going to go into room 4.
Hey, John and David. I think you're muted, David. You too, John.
There we are. Okay.
Okay. How's it going? We're group 1. John, you're still muted.
I wanted to be a different group. I got stuck in this group automatically. How do you change groups? Sorry.
Let's see here.
Well, let's see. I could just leave.
Oh yeah, just go to join breakout room. Yeah.
Okay, just me and you, David.
Great dude.
And then, okay, Carol.
Hello, Carol. Yeah.
Hi, Carol.
Okay, so which room is this one? Because the one that I was in just a minute ago wasn't really what was posted in the chat.
This is, I think it's a group 1. I just randomly chose
I did too.
room. Yeah.
So this is group 1.
This is group 1. Yeah.
Okay.
There's
So
no specific assignments though, right? So
Yeah, there are different assignments and there are different prompts.
Oh, I thought we were supposed to respond to all 3 prompts. No?
No, because I was just in the other room and they were going to talk about debt forgiveness, and that was not the room that I wanted to be in.
Oh, okay.
The one I wanted to be in was how could we get the union to do something about this?
Yeah. And yeah, so we don't have a union in our university, but we're trying.
What school do you work for?
So I work in Michigan at Grand Valley State University. It's in a town called Allendale, maybe about 20 minutes west of Grand Rapids. Public regional. Got about 25,000 undergraduates, and it's a good school to work at. It's like, historically it's been, able to offer, really solid, high quality liberal arts education at scale. It's student centered. It's not our responsibilities are, teaching, research, and then service. But, about 4 years ago, we got a new president, and they cleaned house, and they've basically brought on, a squadron in the senior leadership team. It keeps on growing, that has caused, faculty, staff, students alike to feel like we're just in the middle of a neoliberal smackdown of the first order, right? So organizing is necessary, but, it's difficult. And it's, our challenges are unique to this particular university. But, I'm also in the AUP, an executive officer in our AUP. It's an advocacy chapter. And I attended something 2 weeks ago with AUP local, and they're talking about, the problems and challenges that folks are facing at a variety of institutions. And it seems like we're all in the middle of a smackdown right now, right?
So what is the AAUP doing in terms of addressing it?
Well, so the advocacy chapter, we started in 2000, and we've done several events, during COVID, in the aftermath of COVID, we did, some virtual events, and then I had a couple in-person events. The first event that we had was on the rising cost of tuition at colleges, and also the issue of student debt. And lots of students attended. I had my students read Jason's excellent essay, The Miseducation of the Indebted Student, which is in AUP's magazine, Academe. It's accessible and very well written. And my experience with students is that most of them are heavily indebted and work 15, 20, 30, 40 or more hours a week while taking a full load, and the scales just fall away from their eyes, right? So it's very galvanizing for them. And so what we've been trying to do with AUP and, concerned faculty along with student groups is to do some political education, just raising awareness about the fact that you look at the history of the university, and it hasn't always been this way. But students feel it as just natural or normal. And so these sort of consciousness raising events and just political education, I think is helpful in as much as it encourages students and faculty and staff, whoever wants to participate, to realize that this is not normal. And this serves, the political and economic interests of the ruling class. And, universities seem to be run like kleptocracies anymore. And debt is, a major way that economic wealth is siphoned to the top. And we are having a symposium on debt. We got an internal grant at our university. So a couple colleagues of mine to help students to imagine what a debt-free college experience might be like. And so we're planning on video recording it, doing audio recordings and curating people's stories and putting them to a podcast form, maybe even a documentary or both, to just, spread the awareness not only on campus, but also, anybody else who is willing and interested to listen to, make it a national conversation, right? And an ongoing and sustained conversation.
Yeah.
Hi, John.
Yeah, I think the problem with what you're saying is that given that America is a country in decline, and given that the capitalist system worldwide is in decline, this is normal. It goes, it goes together with everything else going on in our society, which is why the students accept it as being natural,
Yeah.
And basically, I don't think there are any cheap and easy solutions to it. There's a lot of money invested into this. So ultimately, in a certain sense, we should educate people around it, but the students know it already. Happy makes their lives. The question is what you can do about it. And ultimately, I think it comes in a package with all the other things we need to do something about. Ultimately, I mean, that's his revolution.
The problem at CUNY, which is where I am, and I'm sure this is, wide ranging, is that, basically the union leadership won't even entertain a discussion about anything other than let's go negotiate with the mayor or let's picket somebody. This is what my union tends to do. And whenever we try to say, well, let's have a conversation about some other approach, maybe striking, let's talk about it. It's like, they don't want to hear about it. They won't entertain it. They won't even discuss it. It's just, you didn't even say it, right? You didn't even say it. Even though you're standing at the mic, you didn't say this. And so really, they're the major impediment in trying to do anything, because they're the ones that are constantly stepping in front of you and stepping in the way of really actually organizing anything meaningful. I mean, we could shut everything down in a second. Right, we're the majority of the population. Working class people I'm not working anymore as long as you treat me like shit. But the problem is we're all sort of isolated, pitted against each other, all this, everything that they do. And this is the fault, in my opinion, of the union bureaucrats. And a lot of people don't want to say anything about them. They want to point to management, and management clearly is, I get it. My chancellor makes $1 million a year, and 2 people in my department were just laid off who are adjuncts. Today was their last day. And so, I think we have to start talking about the bureaucrats and what they're doing and how they're an impediment. And unless we do that, we're not going to be able to fundamentally change anything. We have to really get rid of them.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. There's one problem on the student debt issue. There's a particular problem, which is that it's not something that university administrations really have any control over. Ultimately, this is a national level thing,
Yeah.
So it's like you can't go on strike at CUNY to demand abolition of student debts because CUNY has no ability to abolish student debts. So there's a lot of issues that you can deal with on the state level, local level. This is not one of them. But everything you say is true.
Looks like somebody just came in and then left. So one of the questions it is asked is, how does debt impact your teaching practice?
Well, frankly, I would prefer, because I think we already had everybody, gave a wonderful talk about how debt impacts them. I'm not sure where that will take us if we continue that. I'd prefer to talk about what we could do.
Yeah.
About this.
Okay. So if this is a national problem, right? And for instance, at Grand Valley State University, we're having a debt symposium. We're engaged, with AUP, political education, consciousness raising, helping students to be able to see that this is not normal, right? To be able to deconstruct, the idea that going into debt in order to get a college degree is somehow normal, acceptable. Then, the next thing is to extend the conversation across institutions, right? And so it demands, like, if it's a national problem, then it has to be a national conversation. And so how do you develop the infrastructure, right? To be able to extend that conversation, right? Because my sense is that, a lot of students that come to my university, if they're having this conversation, they're having it in isolated sort of classes, right? And I'm one of the few professors, as far as I know, at the university who makes, who integrates, debt pedagogy into the curriculum. With this debt symposium, if a considerable number of students and faculty participate, that's great, but it won't be the entire university, right? And so the question is, how do you sustain these things? And also, how do you connect the conversation from one institution to the next? So that's it's a national conversation.
Well, are you an official in your union?
We don't have a union.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the problem is we're trying to get a union, but it's a long, complicated process, and we're a conservative part of the country. And, it's difficult to get tenured and tenure track faculty on board with the union conversation because faculty workload is just absolutely insane. And so many faculty are just enervated or just plain scared, they feel defeated.
So, but you said that you had some discussions about debt. Where were these discussions held?
Well, with AUP, that's an advocacy chapter. It's not a union. It's not a collective bargaining chapter. And so we had those with faculty and students online and in person at the university.
And what are you proposing that they do?
That who does?
That the faculty, the students, what are you putting out there to them?
We're not, the only thing we're putting out there right now is just political education and raising awareness. And so, in trying to organize. And that's what we got this internal grant to have a debt symposium to help students to imagine what a debt-free college experience might be like. So that's a next step.
Well, I think in terms of expanding the conversation, there already is a national conversation. It's been a big political issue for a number of years. Obama talked about student debt. Biden talks about student debt. He made a statement recently proposing something or other. So there's no need to start a national conversation. As a national conversation exists already. But what does the conversation consist of? It consists of liberals saying that we can afford it and conservatives saying that we can't. So it gets down to money, the root of all evil, as the Bible says. So I don't think it's necessary really to explain, certainly not to explain to students that student debt is bad. You know, the question is, it boils down to money, just like everything does. And it would be very expensive to cancel all student debt, which is what you need to do. It would be extremely expensive. Then it might be hard to afford, let us say, sending bombs to Gaza or you know, cluster bombs to Ukraine, or hiring more police, or you know, all the other things that the government wants to do, which all take money. Anyway, so I think that basically, well, in terms of what we should call for about, you know, I mean, actually, I do talk about it. The book that I'm writing talks about it a little bit in the introduction and makes the general point that you used to have this thing called the American dream. You had this concept of upward mobility, that if you worked hard and kept your nose clean, you would advance like into the professions, or maybe become rich, like if you're really brilliant, like the other Wozniak who invented jobs, you know, or whatever. But the problem is that due to mounting tuitions and student debt, the American dream no longer really exists. It's more of the American nightmare exists. And the ultimate cause for that is the fact that capitalism is in decline. So in terms of doing things, I think the effective route to do things is through unions, and your university needs to be unionized, and then bringing in support beyond the union members, because obviously it's the easiest possible issue to get student support around. For action on faculty. However, the problem is a national problem. You can't occupy buildings or have an encampment or a strike to abolish student debt, because the administration are not in a position to do that.
Right.
You know. So, but that's in terms of doing something around the issue, unionizing and bringing in support from students and work, you know, and all the different workers of the unions. And the general community, because everyone thinks, people tend to think education is a good idea and tend to think it should be cheaper. You know, I think that's a generally strong attitude for Americans who are not in the Fortune 500, you know. So, but it involves more than, you know, there are no simple immediate solutions to the debt crisis, although naturally, if they want, various palliatives have been actually proposed and even passed. But none of them, as we all know, solve the issue. They're a result of political pressure. Anyway.
I mean, for me, this is definitely a class question, obviously, because it's only poor people who end up getting into debt and rich people don't. And so I don't know how you're organizing your educationals, but I really think you have to talk about the class question.
Yeah.
The working class pays all the time. And at the very least, you have to demand that the rich pay. So you have to tax the rich. I mean, in New York, there are 136 billionaires. 136 billionaires, and tuition continues to go up, and my salary continues to go down.
Yeah.
And so there's something wrong with this picture,
Yeah,
right?
it's
You're not paying
hypocrisy.
really, it's so it really has to be driven home that this is really the capitalism, that this is why working class people are suffering, and why, you know, the government can figure out how to pay $14 billion and send it to Israel to bomb Gaza, and can't afford to literally, the lights in my classroom a lot of them don't even work. You turn on the switch and it doesn't work. And I don't know whether because there isn't any worker there to change them or because there's something wrong, but you'll never know because there's not enough people to be doing the work. And I mean, this is really capitalism. So the focus of any educational should be about that and uniting the working class to fight. This free education is a working class issue, right? And when CUNY was free until 1976, and that's when Black people started to come to CUNY.
Yeah.
And New York was in debt. And so basically they decided Black people need to leave or pay a lot of money. It's race and class is just so connected especially in education. So, you know, I would suggest that you be as radical as you possibly can be.
Yeah.
And talk about organizing with people because people are doing this all across the country. Let's find out who's doing what, and let's see how we can connect up and have like broader meetings about this. And should we shut down, you know, all the universities? Let's talk about real strategy about what to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and so we are starting to do that. Students for Democratic Society, we're in conversation with them. And also, we just started a Faculty for Justice in Palestine. There's Students for Justice in Palestine, Jewish Voices for Peace. We have the editor of the student newspaper, who is also part of SDS, who's going to be covering our event on debt. And so connecting those issues and also connecting to them the class, I think, is absolutely essential. Yeah.
Can I just ask, because I was in SDS when I was in college at Columbia University in the year 1971. I've been around for a while, but I gather this is not the same SDS. Or do I have the initials wrong?
Well, so I think it's Students for Democratic Society. It was formerly Young Democratic Socialists of America, but they changed it, I think, just last year.
Why DSA? I know that still exists.
Why DSA? It's SDS. It's Students for a Democratic Society.
So it's okay. Well, anyway, not familiar with the group, but yeah, I think I had heard of something called SDS, which was Maoist or something like that. But anyway, a few years back at one of the colleges in the Bay Area, but I don't think they're around anymore in the Bay Area. Just one thing is actually, Carol, the point you make. Yes, they have free tuition at CUNY during the late 1670s after huge student struggles for that, including dramatic, student strikes, seizures, so on and so forth, at a time when America was still on top of the world. It's interesting that it was abolished in 1976, because in 1975 was when the United States lost the war in Vietnam. And the United States has essentially been in decline ever since, except for an interruption in the 90s after Bush Sr. won the Cold War and the Gulf War. So America was on top of the world for a while, until first you had 9/11, then you had the fiasco of the wars of Iraq and Afghanistan, and finally you had the great economic collapse of 2008. And America no longer has hegemony over the world. America's going downhill, and so American education is going rapidly downhill. It's all in one ball, and you can't draw out the separate three. You have to look at it in terms of the whole picture. And that's what I would say for educational purposes, in talking to students about the debt crisis, in talking to in raising the conversation.
Yeah, and also, it reminds me of something that Christopher Newfield mentioned in his book, The Great Mistake, how we wrecked public universities, how we can fix them. And I think it was in the late 60s when Reagan was governor in California. It was basically, college is basically tuition free. And all of a sudden you had Black and Latinx and Asian American students enrolling just at a moment where there's this great cultural ferment and unrest related to, anti-imperial movements, Vietnam, what have you. And I remember I think he said the Reagan said something about welfare bums and basically punishing student protesters, right? By raising tuition, and that's where it all started, as it were, right? And here we are in a moment right now where the military-industrial complex, right, is effectively raining bombs on Gaza, and you have the student encampments, and so there's a similar situation to 1968 around that time. And I think that is also if you listen to the students and you follow the students' lead, I feel like that's the way to go as an educator. But I think unfortunately there are not enough of us, at least at our university, that are willing to really listen to the students and take them seriously. But if we can amplify their voices, then that's one thing that we can do.
Or at least support the encampment, support the students, who've been arrested and brutalized. That's extremely important.
Yeah. Yeah, that's part of the reason we formed Faculty for Justice in Palestine. It's a small group, but hope it'll grow this semester.
Yeah. Oh, just Reagan. I mean, I teach California history. When Reagan got elected in 1964, he was elected on two bases. One, 64, 65, I forget the year right now. One, as the great opponent of the Watts Rebellion, and also as a great supporter of a ballot prop to defend racial segregation in housing. But second, as against the Berkeley students, as against the FSM, and then as governor.
What is the FSM?
Berkeley, 64.
You said
freedom speech movement.
Okay, yeah.
Right, Mario Savio and all that. Anyway, and then it was in 1969, 70 that you had the People's Park thing at Berkeley, and in which Reagan called out the National Guard, and at one point is actually dropped bombs on the campus. So yeah, it was I think it might have been tear gas, but there was at least one student who was killed by Reagan's California National Guards in the suppression of the People's Park event. It's and of course of the anti-draft law. Yeah, it's all tied together. It's and yeah, if we want to educate around the debt crisis, we need to bring in all the factors that are involved, and everything is involved one way or another.
Yeah.
But it's not just students and faculty that are facing this debt crisis, and everybody in the United States. This is not just an issue for the universities. This is an issue for the working class in general.
Yeah.
And whether people have to borrow money in order to pay all kinds of things because they don't have free healthcare, so this is something that all workers could and should be brought into. It's not shouldn't just be isolated to the universities, because and a lot of workers send their kids to school and then end up having to borrow money. So it would be better to broaden the discussion outside of the university walls itself and into other industries where, as I said, people send my grandson is going to Stony Brook, which is part of SUNY. And even though some of the financial aid was paid by the state, he has to pay $13,000 now in order to go to school. And so that means my daughter has to borrow money. And, so I'm saying this is a universal thing. We need to get the whole working class on board.
Yeah.
And it's actually the point with current technology that, of course, most children, working class kids, want to move out of the working class into the professionals, the middle class. The fact is, we've gotten to the point of technology. There's a lot of working class, even blue collar jobs that you need some college education to be able to do. That used to be the mission of community colleges. Not so much in California anymore. As a community college instructor, I'm extremely aware of that.
I know. I teach history also, and I had a student who was, a relatively good student. And I said, so you're interested in taking any more history? And he said, I can't because my financial aid won't pay for it. Because he came in as automotive engineer, so that's what, you know, fixing cars, so that's what his financial aid will pay for. And even though he likes my class and he liked history, he just couldn't take any more.
It's a very
So-
common story at my university.
It really just dumbs everybody down because you take specifically what you need to get the hell out of there so you can
Yeah.
get a job.
Yeah.
I think somebody's calling us.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
30
about 30
Oh,
seconds.
There's one
Yeah.
thing, a very peculiar thing is going on in the Peralta system. The admission, they happen to have a certain budget surplus, and the admission and the decline is going so low that for the last year now, at Merritt College, they not only do they have free tuition, they also have free meals for lunch. And despite that, the campus turns into a ghost town.
Wow.
There's a lot of huge factors destroying education, and the high tuitions are not the only one.
We don't even have a cafeteria at my job.
Yeah,
You know, I mean, it's like just, what is this place?
Right.
You know, the
Yeah.
students have no place to go, to hang out, to eat, to refresh themselves, you know, I mean, really, it's absurd.
yeah.
Somebody just came on.
You just came on time to end in about 10 seconds. I think. Oh, no, we're back in the main group, I guess.
Oh, we are. Okay, I didn't see us going through that transition.
Okay.
Hey everybody, Brian, how you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty well. Good to see you.
Good. Asher or Thomas might know, but our environmental debt and environment report's coming out soon, the white paper. So I'll have to.
Oh, great. Yeah, you told me about that a little ways back, so that's good to know.
Yeah. Did you get lost in thought in there, Joe, or what?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I haven't had dinner, so I think I'm lost I'm losing something. But no, I really appreciated hearing from Thomas, your debt collective organizer, Thomas, his perspective on some things. We're going to follow up about trying to take up the question of being less polite about the demand that default payments
Yes.
treated as legit payments, which is something I'm personally affected by. About 10, I think almost 10 years of defaulted payments that don't count. So anyway, that's
All right.
we're back.
Yeah, and we're coming up at 10 o'clock Eastern time. So I want to be respectful of that. I did, and Joe and I had mentioned that we did want to hear some comments from people that were in different groups. So why don't we just open this up to a little bit of a share out. So if anyone from any of the groups wants to talk about what you discussed and some big ideas, questions, directions for action, etc., please again just go ahead and type your name in the stack or the chat, and we'd like to hear a little bit about some of the conversation you had.
Carol, why don't you go for us?
Okay, so what we were basically talking about was that keeping this debt issue within the university itself is too narrow, because the entire working class is impacted. First of all, what I was saying was that in New York, there are 136 billionaires and none of these fuckers pay any taxes. And so if we had a strong, movement, union movement, we would be able to put pressure on the powers that be to tax these people. But the bureaucrats really, in my union, just stand in the way of getting anything done. I'm a delegate to the union, and I get up and I say, well, okay, so maybe we're not allowed to strike, but maybe what we should be doing is talking about it, because what's going on now is really, we've been negotiating a contract for a year and a half, and we're no closer to getting one than we were a year and a half ago. And so we have to start developing different strategies. And that means, the union bureaucrats have to get out of the way and start, and open up the conversation to a broader discussion about strategy. And we need to do this to connect with people all across the country, because all workers are impacted in the same way as workers in New York are impacted. And so we need to start developing a strategy, I think. And I think this was a good conversation in the beginning, but we really have to start developing a strategy so that when we do make contacts with people across the country, that we talk about those kinds of things that we can do to move the struggle forward. Because, you know, I think it's wonderful to have clinics and all of that. I think that's a great idea. But you know, capitalism is the reason why, you know, and as Joe said before, we're a debt society, and, you know, people are unwilling to tax the rich. Nobody is willing to even discuss that in my union. It's really amazing. And so I think it's time for us to, like, what do we want to do concretely? And how do we want to share this with people across the country? And, you know, maybe at some point organize a national general strike around debt, because it's not just the people who work at the university. I was just saying that my grandson is going to college, and, you know, financial aid is going to pay some, but his mother is going to have to come up with $13,000 somehow, you know. So it's broader than just the university. It's working class people are in general are in debt, and we have to really come up with a strategy about how to start to resolve that.
Good summary.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. And just to, I'm going to put this in the chat, but we agree with you 1,000%. And in fact, the Working Class Journal in these times, we just did an entire debt issue about different debt types to talk about exactly what you were talking about. And on Friday, there's going to be an online article. I interviewed labor union leaders from 6 different sectors to talk about debt and labor. And so they're doing exactly what you're mentioning, Carol. I'll be sure to send that your way.
Thanks.
But they all would agree 100% with you.
And if I could,
Go ahead,
and if I
Joe.
could add one thing there, just to help continue to promote the in these times issue and generally union solidarity there. They have right now, if you are a union member and you don't have a subscription in these times and you'd like one, you can get one. You just go there, tell them your name and what union you're in. That's it. And you can get a year subscription. And I think, I'm not just saying this is an individual thing, but I think this could be an organizing tool, an educational tool around, you know, this debt issue that they have, which the takeover issue, the debt collective. It's great. I'm working through it right now. It's definitely worth getting itself, but there's a lot of labor coverage there and some higher ed stuff. And I think that, as well as stuff beyond the campus, I just think it's a tool. Could be reading groups. I just feel like it's just shame to not take advantage. So please consider getting yourself signed up. It'll take you 5 seconds.
Thanks, Joe. We have Justine and Bruce, and I think Maria has a hand raised. So Justine, you're up.
Great. We had such a great conversation. And I was trying to remind everybody that it's us who makes the change at the end, right? And so being in these spaces and sharing ideas with each other, right? Like if we don't do it, nobody is. So we might as well just figure out how to get this done, right? But also to Carol's point, one of the things that we were talking about is we had Helen with us, who is in the nonprofit industry, right? And talking about the way in which students go to college, particularly if they're coming from, not always, but coming from like marginalized backgrounds, first-gen students, BIPOC students, et cetera, right? Go to college so that they can enter into the nonprofit world, right? And then they're not paid anything in the nonprofit world, and so they can't pay their debt and all of these different things, right? And so the way in which Carol's point is very clear that this goes beyond the institution of the university or the community college or whatever higher education institute you're a part of, right? And so one of the things that we started talking about was the relationship around solidarity between faculty, staff, and students, and talking about how, you know, the staff are also facing contingency where they're being given more and more, what's the word I'm looking for? Part-time positions, right? And when the college doesn't want to hire even part-time positions, they want to then hire students to do those part-time positions, such as advising, for example, right? Like these types of different things. And so I'm not going to take up too much time here, just because I don't know that we have that much time left, and there's others behind coming after me. But one of the things that we kind of started talking about was what would it look like to repurpose those like college 101, kind of like how to do college 101 classes, first year experience classes, or the other general ed classes, and put them to actual use in making them be about how to do labor organizing, how to do debt organizing, right? And so that students, no matter where they go, whether they're on their campuses doing that organizing, but then when they leave campus to go do whatever other work that they're going to go do, right, they have those skills already, right? And what we do in that moment then is we repurpose the use of higher education, right? And so that it's not producing these market norms for capitalism, right? And instead what we're doing is producing folks who want to be free and who can go work with each other to make that freedom a reality, right? And so Joe, then Barry said something about like maybe Helu is going to work on something like that. So very excited and interested in that. And I thought that was a great strategy point. So thanks, Carol, for starting us off. I will hand it off to whoever is going next.
Thank you, Justine. And you're offering a lot of beautiful and powerful statements tonight that I'm glad we have recorded. So thank you for doing that. It must be the Northern Lights. Bruce, you're up.
So a couple ideas that came out of a very wide-ranging discussion that I won't try to summarize, but just maybe the first part, we were talking about all these structural factors and obstacles, including the way that the student population changed from the 60s on. And that's when you see that shift from the tax state to the debt state. You see the underfunding of public universities. You see the rise of debt. So what to do about it, right? And another structural factor we were talking about at the end was the fact that governors appoint members of the board of trustees or board of governors in most states. Governors have the initiating influence on state budgets, many of which have to be balanced by state constitution. And so structurally, they're financially fiscally conservative, no matter what color their state supposedly is. So how do you organize to kind of pressure governors to break at that mold, or like Carol was saying, like actually tax the rich? And this led to my thought about how Helu could, and I think Mike brought this up before he left as well. How can Helu help folks learn from victories like in California or Massachusetts with these millionaire taxes? How could they publicize them? How could they help other union members and leaders push for them in their states? So that's just one example of many. But until, I mean, it's going to be crucial that we not just swing at every piñata that comes our way about, oh, Janice, we have to make sure we have membership. Oh, student debt, it changes daily, as Jerry was saying. So many piñatas for us to hit in day-to-day work. But how do we also keep our eye on the ball?
Thank you, Bruce. And just to tie some knots, so Joe Ramsey, Joe Barry brought up California millionaire tax. Joe is very familiar with the Massachusetts millionaires tax. And people have used the word debt state on a couple of different occasions here. You also brought up the key aspect here. If you don't have another source of revenue coming in, that's when you run into the problem. Not to simplify things too much, but yeah, you need to have that other form of revenue so that you're not dependent on Wall Street for the loans and or individual student debtors. So thank you for stressing the revenue side of that. And I'm hoping, as you said, and that Joe Barry mentioned, that Helu starts to talk about that in the future. I think I saw Maria and then Mike Grebe, and then maybe we start to wind things down because we're over 10 o'clock already. So Maria, a few comments, and then Mike, and then there we go.
Yeah, so I was in the same breakout room, and I really appreciated the perspective on how funding for higher education fits into state budgets and by extension federal and so forth, which also brings me back to the question of benefit, right? And as Joe asked initially, how would our lives be different if we didn't have all this debt? Well, one way would be, of course, more discretionary income that we could put toward charity or political causes we care about and so forth. And of course, that's one reason among many for which the banks and lenders and so forth want us to stay indebted, right? Not only so they'll keep collecting our money, but so that we can't advocate and agitate as much as we might otherwise. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And of course, it's at the level of the university and students. That's how we end up producing, sometimes with the blessing of administration and even some faculty, these corporate drones, you know, who just want to put in there for however many years, get that credential, do what they have to do, right? Make their money and be good little voters, right? Vote the way their boss does and everything. And it's a much bigger, well, it's a huge question, but those are some of the nuances, I guess, that I'd like to draw everybody's attention to.
Thank you for fleshing those out, Maria. And you know, one of the things I heard in your comment was the ways in which, you know, that serves as a form of disciplining people and controlling conduct, what we do or don't do. So thanks for making that crystal clear. Mike Grebe, and then I'm gonna let Joe Ramsey have the last word. And
that was a mistype. It is green, but thank you. I'm glad people are reading that. I was trying to fix that, but that's not you. We talked about a couple things. One of the things that we talked about was some of the barriers that happen for contingent faculty, how we should do more to probably inform contingent faculty about some of the plans that are out there, and then how, of course, we need to probably strive more for cancellation, because one of our people had a very good point about how these income-driven repayment plans, you know, they haven't worked, and everything has changed overall, and how we need to really just push for more cancellation. And you know, we really need more cancellation, what and how that does. And I, you know, for myself, I'm in the same position that Jerry talked about earlier. You know, I've had my stuff forgiven, but I kept my letter, and I still am waiting. I'm still putting money away because, you know, I'm worried that it's going to be taken back. The other thing was to figure out how ways to work more in solidarity with students. You know, things how we can help them as far as things like work with them regarding things like institutions who withhold transcripts because they still owe fees, and then they're turned over to collection. This is something that's really kind of, you know, some kind of credential policing. This is kind of ridiculous because, you know, my whole thing is if you're turning somebody over to collection, you know, then you're not going to get all that money back, you know, and you're only going to get maybe 40% or 10% even of whatever the person's going to collect. So that's, you know, that's just a way to kind of give students a bad mark rather than, because there's really no hope of actually collecting all that. And so there's some way we should probably kind of work on leveraging, some way of leveraging that cause of debt collection to help students as well. Another thing that we talked about was trying to understand the different layers of these institutions and more on how we need to see more action on the state and federal level to change the idea, you know, change the notion of debt and what's behind it all. And I think that makes sense as well, too. And, you know, there have been a lot of proposals out there for free college. Build Back Better was supposed to offer first 2 years of colleges, and the colleges themselves, they don't want to change. They lobbied real hard to have that taken out. And so we have to do more. And I think that faculty unions can help change that. And also by bringing in more and more adjuncts as well. And I think that's one of the things that's really helped in the UUP. I've seen a surge in adjuncts joining because I think more and more, because we are becoming more and more the majority, and we're seeing more and more a push in that direction, where more and more adjuncts are becoming a part of this because we are the majority nationwide. So, you know, not at every school, but en masse we are. So I also have somewhere in my notes. What else did we talk about? We talked about that, and also some of the problems that have to deal with those who didn't pay, who, you know, couldn't pay, ended up being delinquent and have their wages garnished. How it's very unfair for a lot of those garnishments not being used and credited toward payment on their loans. which I think is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, if you're paying, even if you're being forced to pay, you should actually have some part of that be credited because you are paying, even though you're being forced to pay. So it should be there and it should be credited. So some ways that we can work on help students to help address these situations. That's it.
Mike.
I think Joe is around here. He could add more.
Yeah,
if he needed to.
I was in that group too, and Mike, you did a fine job, and we have a note stock we can all look through. But yeah, I mean,
There you go.
it was pointed out by one of the Thomas, I believe, in the group that although there are existing debt advocacy groups that have requested politely that the Department of Education include default payments towards things like public service loan forgiveness, that advocacy has never been strong enough and has never gone anywhere. But he did clarify there's nothing in the law that says that default payments couldn't count. So it's actually, it is still a choice being made. And as Thomas pointed out, a very horrifically moralistic, carceral, choice to kind of say like, oh, good debt subjects can maybe be considered, but bad ones can't. And that's something we should reject and get loud about. It's not the whole piece, but I think taking on, it's stigma on stigma, right? It's debt, and then you're a bad debt person. So I feel like, why not just go all the way and say, we don't give a, and here I'm tempted to swear, but we don't give a rat's ass, if you've missed a payment, like your debt is still illegitimate. If you got it, particularly seeking something that society needs. Why should anyone have to go into debt to get skills and training society needs? That is the absurdity here. Maybe one way to wrap up with, and I'll just offer one other thought before closing with just a plug for the contingency task force for those who might be interested but who aren't yet connected with us. We do meet like bi-weekly. I think this is our 7th or 8th event we've either put on. I think our second co-sponsored event, this one with the Debt Collective, which I really value, Jason and others who have made this possible. But I'll just say, I think we also, one thing that wasn't said, I mean, Carol said about we need to expand it to the whole working class, which I agree with. We also need to expand it to the whole educational sector. I do think that we need to get more people, students, their parents, their families, the teachers, the advisors, just up in arms about, doing what's necessary to keep these kids from being put into debt, whether, free public tuition, because to some degree, and I know at least for psychologically, the temporality of debt, and I'm thinking much of my is just like people that think, well, I'll bite the bullet now, I'll make it up later, but like there's a certain way in which like sometimes the students on campus, I think, can be in that zone, where they're like, well, I've already, it's a fait accompli, feel like we got to get them earlier too, and be thinking about, and also we need to bring us old folks, that have the debt now back into into the high school before the kids have the debt, or as the kids are taking on the debt, as when they're on our campuses, obviously, which is, as Jason pointed out, when they're together in space for some period of time. We need to bring that future into the present to explode the kind of delusions that you can like pay this back. It's okay, you'll pay it back later. I actually like to think that one of the reasons we're seeing, one of many reasons we're seeing so much an explosion of, in a good sense, of graduate worker organizing, is because that myth that I had was sleeping with, or was sleeping putting my consciousness to sleep a little bit in grad school, is like, oh, don't worry, I'll get an $80,000 a year tenure track job right out of grad school, so this debt's not going to be a big fucking deal. But like that, most people know now that ain't the job that's waiting for you. And so it's intolerable and irrational to accept, low pay, let's say for graduate students now, that requires you to live half off of debt in the first place. So, I mean, things are moving and these things are clearly related. And I think the more we can think about how the time and space of debt and trying to fight against the fragmentation, the system in space and time, the way it tries to spread us out so we don't ever get our shit together. I think we need to be bringing people together across all kinds of lines and silos. And at least I think we did some of that tonight. Debt Collective, Contingency Task Force, HELU. I'm hoping we can do more of it in the future. And y'all reach out to me if you'd like to get more involved in the Contingency Task Force or even just HELU more broadly. I'm happy to help connect you if you're not already connected. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Jerry and others.
Thank you, everyone, for coming, and keep your eye out for future Jubilee School events from Debt Collective, including another one on College for All. And as we say at Debt Collective, you are not alone. and you are not A-LOAN. So stay in the struggle. Thank you so much. And I look forward to meeting you all in person one day, having drinks and getting some stuff done. Jerry, thank you so much for all your hard work too. Take care, all. Thank you. Stay
Good
strong.
job. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Take care.
Night.